episode 45 of the podcast. This week, we're going to talk about the difference between a learned response and a physical response, because that's a really tricky subject.
You're listening to the Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast. I'm Chrissy Neumeier-Smith. I'm a certified professional groomer, certified behavior consultant for canines, certified professional dog trainer, and the owner of Happy Critters in Nashua, New Hampshire. And this, my friends and colleagues, is where grooming and training meet.
Dog training is about teaching a learned response. We want them to learn a response, but sometimes their world teaches them a response. Now, how do we know if a response is learned, or if it's truly a biological response? So, I know, dang, we're getting into some big stuff this week, but it's a really tricky subject, so I'm going to give you some ideas of what I look for and some general info to help guide us to thinking about the individuals on our tables. So, a response that is learned is fairly predictable. A dog who has learned that nail trimming is scary through past experiences will respond to parts of the process with a stress or fear response. And that could be seeing the nail trimmers. It could be reaching for the feet, even if we're not planning on trimming nails. It could be holding the foot in a specific way to reach the nail with the clippers. It could be one paw, or it could be even just one single nail. It's based on what their experience was. Now, that learned response based on their experience, experiential learning, right? That learned response may increase or decrease with new experiences and new information. So some examples of increasing could be a dog who goes from pulling away to now pulling away while growling or trying to bite. It could be increased by going from a dog who's worried about one foot to being worried about all feet. Because sometimes I think we forget that. We're like, what? Come on, that's not even the paw that was hurt. Why are you so worried about all your paws all of a sudden? Right? But that fear is growing. And really, are we so different? I want you to think about some human examples here, because we aren't all that different. Let's say that a visit to the dentist could start off as a neutral experience for most of us. Perhaps that's just neutral. I'm not the slightest bit worried about this event, right? And then at one point, you have something that's uncomfortable or painful, and now you've had a different type of experience. We may not know until we're in the chair at our next appointment and start getting nervous. We might not know that that bad experience has changed, given us a learned response the next time, because it's not part of our day-to-day life. And I use the dentist and doctor's office exams and stuff like that as an example pretty often, because I think that dog grooming is not the normal day-to-day stuff. I think that it is a little bit like, going to the vet, going to the groomer. It's a little bit like going to the dentist, going to the doctor. These are things we don't really look forward to most of the time. We know that they can be uncomfortable, could be painful, could be fine, right? So we tend to do kind of the same thing. But I'm going to give you an example from one of my dogs from my past to give you an example of a learned response. So Isa tore her dew claw, left front dew claw, in the park. We were running around, and I spotted blood before she even felt it. But for a long time, she would cringe when it came to trimming just that nail. Is that the memory of pain? I don't know. Could be, because I really can't get into her head. But I can tell you that she only did it with the one dew claw, not both. She was very, very consistent in her responses, and it made sense. There's a logical flow when it's something that is learned through an experience. It was a really slow process for her to replace that fear. Now, if I knew then what I know now, I would have worked on it. But instead, I did what many of us do and many of our owners do, and I worked on it just when it was nail trim time, which I now realize isn't the best way to work on things. And hopefully you guys are now thinking, yeah, we should probably work on it a bunch before the nail actually needs to be trimmed again. But because of that, we had a slow decrease in that fearful behavior. Because each nail trim after the scary event was gentle and pain-free, it was able to decrease the fearful behavior, but it took a long time. So if you listened to the podcast last week, we talked about white marbles and black marbles. Like if you have a vase, and this is a way of tracking progress and a way to kind of visualize your progress. If you had a vase And white marbles are good experiences, and black marbles are times that it didn't go right, or bad experiences, right? But times it went right, times it didn't go right. She was about a year old when this happened, and up until that point, her nail trim experiences had all been white marbles. So imagine her vase has a pretty solid layer of white marbles at the bottom. But ripping that claw, boom, there's a black marble. Oh my God, I got a boo-boo paw, right? Now she has this black marble. And then I had to, of course, trim off the broken piece, which I made as comfortable for her as possible, but it was still a little bit of an ow, right? Now, if you're an owner listening to this, I suggest you go to your vet for things like that. If you're a groomer treating somebody else's dog, I'm not sure. But because I'm a groomer and a former vet tech, and it was my own dog, and I could easily see that I'm not quicking her, I'm just taking off the edge of this broken nail that's dangling and just going to cause her discomfort, I snipped it off. So please don't judge. But I know it's the vet's job, but I made a judgment call on my own dog. But it was a sore spot, and I had to manipulate it a little bit. Then we also had some bandaging, right? So there were a couple more black marbles. There were a couple more events that she thought were really uncomfortable and kind of scary. Now, part of why she thought it was scary, and I know that's very anthropomorphic, thinking it's scary. I don't know what was going through her head, but part of her stress response is that she was a nervous Nelly. Yeah, more tech talk, nervous Nelly. She was kind of a nervous little dog in general. And to have something that was uncomfortable and needing help being calmed down. So it healed up fine. But it took a long time and a lot of collecting white marbles for that vase to have more white marbles than black marbles. Does that make sense? You guys following what I'm saying? So even though she had a baseline of nail trims are not a big deal, an event happened that gave her a couple of scary moments and a little bit of discomfort. I don't think it was terribly, terribly painful. It was a little bit of discomfort. I mean, it's not like she was, yelping and running around the park screaming, But then after that, we needed good experiences to build and build and build and build. That's kind of what learned behaviors look like. They're very, very predictable. It didn't switch from paw to paw. Now, we can wonder if what happened is that she's starting to realize that this doesn't hurt. Maybe. I don't know. We don't know what's going on in her head. But I can tell you that the calm, cool, collected owner holding her paw, helping her to stay calm, comfortable, and cooperative. I know, so many C's, right? But helping her stay calm, comfortable, and cooperative was able to give her enough to relax and allow me to trim the nail. I didn't fight her over it. I didn't force it. And keeping those 3 C's in mind and helping her be calm for it till eventually it seems to have been forgotten about. But it took a long time. That's what learned behaviors look like. They are very, very predictable. They don't vary a lot. Now, biological behaviors are a little bit more like the response to fear. Not necessarily what you're afraid of, but how the body responds to it. And that's where we start running into, we need a vet check. We might need a veterinary behaviorist. We might need anxiety medications or a variety of tests. There might be something more happening than simply needing training. So what I mean by that is if every time I reached for that one toenail, she totally screamed and freaked out and blew her anal glands, well, that would be an unusual response to something fearful, right? It's the unusual responses, the dramatic, super dramatic responses, and any response that is not predictable is often something that we kind of wonder, all right, I kind of need to know that this dog is healthy, that this dog is functioning well, because behaviors that are learned are very, very predictable. So it shouldn't have a whole lot to do with the day of the week. I will say, though, there are some differences. For instance, there are a lot of dogs that I do not groom if we have a thunderstorm. It's another stress level in their life that we don't need to pack on doing more things that day, right? Even if they aren't particularly worried about thunderstorms, that's a stress level that I don't want to add more stress to or add more thinking to. Because even if they enjoy grooming, it's a lot of work. And we don't usually think of how much work dogs are doing while they're being groomed, but they're doing a lot of work. They're standing still. And hopefully, I mean, even the dogs who are being good are standing still. They're allowing us to move them around. They're focusing on what's happening. They're tired. They're tired when it's done. They usually run around, goof off a little bit, and then they go home exhausted. Or in my case, because I'm a house call groomer, we goof off for a little bit, and then they just take a nap. They're like, whew, that was a lot. But it actually does take a lot of brain power for them to do grooming. So if there's something else stressful going on in their life, you might see things that bother them have a bigger reaction, but not an absurdly large reaction, right? Reactions, if they're learned, if it's simply a matter of learning, progress, but they don't just suddenly go from, hey, you're trimming my toenails and nothing happened, to one day I freak out entirely because you're trimming my toenails. Like there has to be an event. And if there isn't an event, it sounds more like there's something going on with that dog's biology and not something the dog learned about their paws or about their nails. Another example is I was working with a dog as a trainer. I came in because this dog had decided it was never going to let someone reach for his harness again. Nope, no one's ever going to reach for my harness ever again. It's too close to my ears. But it took a while of me questioning the owner and finding out everything that had gone on and finding about the medical history to find out, yeah, that dog got over an ear infection. And that's when the problem started, because sometimes our owners don't put those things together. Sometimes we don't either. Just through a lot of experience, I've learned to put those things together. So anyway, this dog had had a terrible ear infection and just decided, you know what? No one's going near my ears again. Nope, they feel pretty good now, but nope, it's not worth it. Not going to risk it, you know? And what we had to do was get him to relax again and trust us. And then he was fine. It took a couple weeks worth of training to get him back to the point where he's like, oh yeah, of course you can put my harness on and touch my head and touch my ears. You know, it was a learned behavior, not necessarily an abnormal, I need a veterinary behaviorist kind of a behavior. If you're enjoying my podcast, please remember to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. After talking about what a learned response looks like and how they are very, very specific and they have a pattern and they make sense to us, let's talk a little bit about a biological response. And that might not be the right term. I don't know. I might change it up some other time in the future. But I want you to think about medical problems. A biological response. The body's reaction to fear and stress and anxiety is a biological response. If a dog becomes abnormally very, very intense about something that scares them, like that's an abnormal response. I'm going to give you an example. I used to work with a dog. She has now since passed of old age, but she had been found for rescue. She had a severely broken jaw, and a lot of her behaviors were extreme. She would go from, oh, everything's fine, but if something scared her or made her nervous, she turned into a shark. I really think that she had some brain damage. I mean, she obviously had some head trauma when she got her jaw broken, and so there was some suspicion that maybe there was some brain damage there. So I don't think Daisy knew what Daisy was going to do next. How do you deal with a dog with that sort of a problem? So she was being worked with her vet. She was being worked with a behaviorist for a while. But what we still needed to do was find a way for us to safely groom her. Now, in her case, what we ended up doing was I taught her that she can trust me. We had a muzzle and used a muzzle. I tried the cone, but she thought the cone was very, very frightening. So she didn't mind a muzzle. That might just be part of her background. But what we did was I would touch her leg, for instance. A lot of it was front leg related, which later turned into just nails related. So, but because she was so nervous, because she loses control when she gets upset or finds something upsetting, that she would just burst into rapid fire biting. Like if she were to get on my arm, I'm pretty sure she's the dog that would crawl up it and just chomp, chomp, chomp like it's a ear of corn. And she's a Shih Tzu, so it's not like she's a huge dog, but anybody who works with dogs knows those small mouths are very, very dangerous too, because those are our faces and our hands that are next to dogs when we're working with them. But what I had to do was teach her, like, okay, this leg, and I'd get my hand on her leg and just kind of wait for her to be loose. Now, we've talked about this before on the podcast. There's a difference between still stiff and still that's loose. If she was stiff, we didn't move on, because stiff for her is a spring that's ready to pop, and a dog that's just about to go overboard. But if I could get her loose, then I would proceed and keep her loose, calm, comfortable, and cooperative, right? I know I drill it through everybody's heads, but think about that I can't control the way her body responds to fear. What I can do is control what she finds fearful, what she finds frightening. And by doing this in such a way that I'm putting my hand on her leg, and I just was very consistent of what I told her I was going to be doing. Okay, on your leg, ready? Are you loose? Good. How about now? And I'd lower my hand on her leg, and over time, she became the dog that would, when I was telling her, okay, this leg, are you ready? She'd shift her weight onto the other leg so that I could then lift that one up. And I would tell her, okay, this toenail first. Are you ready? I'd line the clipper and snip, and then snip it. So if at any time she moved away from me, I would allow that. Because what I'm trying to do is keep her emotionally comfortable, because her fear response is abnormal. Her fear response didn't seem to be in her control. And unfortunately, it never really changed for her. And I think that at one point her owner just said, I just get so nervous even watching. She ended up having the vet sedate her for some of her grooms as she got older. You know what? If that's the way the owner feels, I was still grooming the other dog. But I got to say, this dog didn't really like most people. But the trust that we built doing this, I wouldn't have trusted to do her nails and stuff without the muzzle on, only because her responses were out of her control. I really don't think her brain is thinking through, I think I'm going to bite the groomer's hand now. But I think her responses were, oh my God, we're going to die. Like that dramatic fight or flight response, that dramatic adrenaline rush. So what our efforts were to block that by helping her stay comfortable. And the work that I did with her when I would go over and groom the other dog after the vet started sedating her for grooms, which, you know what, if it made her owner feel better and she didn't have any real risk factors for being sedated, so it worked out fine for them. But she would greet me at the door. I was one of the few people that she would try to get to pet her. And her owner was always like, oh my God, I can't believe you're petting her. I'm like, you know what? I put my hand out. She rubbed into it. That's her way of saying, yeah, just a little bit. And I'd pet her a little and walk away, because she's unpredictable. And that's one of the ways you can tell if it's something physical going on. It's a little unpredictable, or maybe it's very predictable, that you would expect her to just go into like crazy land out of nowhere. I know, very tech talk, crazy land out of nowhere. But those are the kind of things that we look at with something that has a physical aspect to it. So she was able to learn to trust me and to listen to some of the words I was saying. I'm not sure if she had brain damage, but I suspect that she did. Like I said, there was head trauma early on. She had a severely broken jaw when they picked her up as a stray. She was pretty matted. Who knows how much pain she had been in roaming around like that and if it had just happened or not. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns with a rescue. She was about 2 or 3 when she got rescued in that state. Who knows? Who knows? But I also don't think at that point, maybe it's due to a head injury, that she was all that smart. There's only so much that she could learn. So it's not like we had a healthy dog to work with. However, the training still had to happen. And because we did that, she got a lot of groomings. I groomed her for years where it was like, all right, just gonna calm you down, and we don't care if it looks pretty. What we're doing is just making sure that the hair is taken off. She always wanted her kind of shaved down, the tick finder, the smoothie. But we got her nails done, and we were able to keep her calm, comfortable, and cooperative. And as long as she didn't become afraid, everything was going to be fine. And that's the difference between something that's learned and something that's a biological response. So there's sort of a blending there where we still need to teach them. We still want a dog to be as safe as possible. There's still things we can learn, and there's still management things that we can do to keep everybody safe. Like, I'm not going to, set a dog up to fail. I want her to feel safe. And we tried a variety of things. Like I said, we ended up with a muzzle, but we did try a variety of things. I tried a cone to see if that was helpful, but she thought that was very disorienting. I think for her, she needed to see what was happening, and it kind of blocked some of her view. I'm anthropomorphizing, but if I had to guess, that's my guess. I tried tying her in 2 spots, like from above and to the side, and that really didn't help much. As soon as she tried to turn and was unable to turn, it really got her going. It became a fearful thing, like it sparked that fear again. But I want you to think about finding the thing that works for an individual and be thinking about, does this make sense from a learned perspective? And I think in many ways her perspective was learned. Because if she wasn't afraid, she'd let you do a whole lot. Once she was afraid, it was game over for the rest of the day. Like, don't even bother trying. Nothing's going to calm that down again. And that's very biological. That's a strange reaction. When we look at our individuals, it's really important to kind of decide, is this dog showing me that their history indicates to them that being touched like this is scary? And can I change that for them? Did they learn that grooming is scary? And can I make them think that grooming is, in fact, not scary? That's really key. And that's sort of the difference between that biological response and that learned response. So Daisy, even though she had suspected head injury, well, definitely a head injury, but probably her skull also, but even though she had definitely physical issues also, she was able to learn. Maybe not as well as if she were a perfectly healthy, happy, normal dog, but she was able to learn a lot, and we were able to keep everybody safe. So this week's action step is I want you to think of one particular case, one particular dog. Maybe it's your own dog. Maybe it's a dog at your animal hospital that you work at, or a dog in your grooming room. But I want you to think about one particular dog who has an issue with this and think, do they have a whole bunch of good experiences in their past and they still have this response? Is there some medical component to this? Or have they learned that this is unpleasant and now we need to teach them that it's not the thing that they thought it was? So this week, pick one example for yourself to really analyze. Take a really close look at. And you know what? Feel free to put that up on the Facebook group, the Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast Facebook group. If you come up with something interesting or you have some questions, I would really like to discuss it with as many of you as possible. So everybody, have a great week and stay curious. If you'd like to talk to me, you can find me through my grooming and training business, happycrittersdogtraining.com, my email, chrissy@happycritters.net, and through the Creating Great Grooming Dogs Facebook page. And we have these awesome devices in our pockets that allow us to do live video with each other. I can help you with the dog on your table. We can set up live lessons, and you may be surprised at how much we can get accomplished together via video.